We're good. Recording.
We're good. We're recording. Hey, hey, hey. Welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural SourceCred brand jam, design jam, logo chat, whatever. Really a big reason why I wanted to have a meeting like this is because I'm pretty new to this. I'm relatively new to Protocol Labs and very new to SourceCred, and I want to make. I'm a visual designer, and I want to make sure that our team of artists knows the folks who know this best, and that we get some good foundations and conversations started. So with that in mind, maybe just since we have just so few people here, maybe we do just a quick run around and make sure everybody knows everybody else. Like I say, I am Eric Ronnie. I'm in Chicagoland, and it is 10 a.m. here, and I'm a visual designer. And I'm going to nominate Dandelion. Go next.
Cool. I am Dandelion, the creator of SourceCred. I'm currently in Tel Aviv, and I'm in the problem of having lots of feels about what I want like logo and branding to look like, and none of the skill to even really know what is or isn't good. So I'm excited to have so many talented folks here on the call.
Mel B, also obviously in Tel Aviv. I'm just an artist by hobby and a partner to this kid. I'm just happy to help wherever I can.
Hand it off.
Oh, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Michelle. Hello, everybody. I work at Protocol Labs. I do lots of various design things, but mostly user experience design and product management. Don't ask me to visual anything, but I'm here to contribute where I can. Let's see. I heard there's a Max on the call, I think. Did I remember that right? Yeah, you're next. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, no, we can't hear you. It's not muted, but it's being difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Z, you can introduce yourself while Max fixes his mic.
I'm Z. I'm the founder of Block Science. That's block diagrams, not blockchain. I'm old school control theorist, coordination scientist of like 15 odd years, and I'm super stoked about SourceCred because it solves a problem which, if you read the article I wrote about it yesterday, is like, ancient and been studied for the last 50 odd years, still no solution.
Yeah. Did you say where you work? Sorry.
A firm called Block Science. It's an R&D firm that
geographically?
Oh, I'm in Oakland right now, so it's 8 a.m. and my team is decentralized.
Right.
Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm in Tucson, Arizona, also 8 a.m. this time of year, anyways.
Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Daniel. Hi, I'm in Normandy in France, and I guess I'm one of those hybrids, coder designer types. I spend pretty much all of my time in the open source industry these days working on the Quasar framework, which is front-end design system using Node.js and Vue.js. And I met with Dandelion last week, I guess, and we had a really good jam. And I just thought I'd stop by and say hello and see if there's anything I could contribute.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. All right, Max, how's the mic?
Yeah, hello again. Okay, perfect. So my name is Max. I'm sorry for this mic issue. I'm UX and UI team lead in my company. Also, I'm running design courses from the UX perspective. I'm trying to implement and utilize the scientific approach towards designing the UX. And I really got curious about SourceCred personally because I want to prove someone inside of my company that vocalization not that important as he thinks. And I love to work at not, uh, not traditional or some. Basically, I love to work with unique and interesting user experiences. So this is the biggest thing why I'm joined the team. Yeah, that's it.
And Max, where are you in the world?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So right now I'm in Ukraine and formerly from Russia, living in Odessa, Ukraine right now.
Max, I love your backdrop. You've got the classiest backdrop of any of us, I think.
Awesome. Welcome, one and all. Oh, that's even better. Yeah, well, I just want to make one of my curse. I'm cursed with seeing faces in everything. When I see something like that, I'm like, oh, that would be a neat head. Just want to take things and stick them in there and make face out of it. My children, it's not a curse to me. I think I'm amused by it, that characteristic that I have, but it's a curse to my children. My children do not like seeing face. Yeah. I know it's a face, Dad. Anywho, here is in the chat there a link to the mural, and I will also share my screen. Well, I may not need to share my screen. I'll share it for starters, just to give you a little tour of the landscape. In case Mural is new to y'all, it's a little a whiteboard, interactive whiteboard, and up here in the corner there's an outline link, so you can see kind of the roughly how I'm thinking this might go. It's all about generating ideas and words and feelings and emotions and things like that. So those kinds of things can't always be controlled. And so this is how I think it'll go. This is kind of the categories I think we'll talk about. These are a couple of the little activities, utilities that might be useful, but if not, we'll wing it. And additionally, what I don't have a little, I didn't include this bit down here. I created a little zone where I thought we could drop links, references, like if you have, if you have this one, like 10 Burton t-shirts, you just love the Burton logo or whatever, and you're like, SourceCred should be the Burton of open source. Dandelion has something already, I can tell. So just drop stuff in there, or if you know of an article like, oh, I get inspired by this kind of artwork, I get inspired by this kind of thinking, and I think that might actually have something to say to SourceCred as we develop our brand and our logo, our identity, whatever the buzzwords are. Just go ahead and drop it down there. And for example, here is, can you see this article? I don't know if I shared,
Yes.
Okay, if I shared my whole screen or
You've got the whole screen.
Right.
So hopefully you turned off your embarrassing notifications, whatever they are.
Yes, I have. Those are the only kind of notifications I get. And so, yes, I made sure that those were turned off. But this is an article by Dandelion that was just posted, and you can actually drag, Mural lets you drag from the URL window right onto the canvas there. So that's pretty handy, because then you can also click on the little pencil and make little notes about why you thought this was an interesting link.
Well, I didn't know that Mural did that.
No.
Well, Mural does everything.
It does everything for you. And when we're all done here, there's a button in the lower right corner that says generate final logo. So we'll be totally finished. I'm gonna stop sharing though. Actually, I'll keep sharing because for the sake of the recording. But let's kick it off with just a 10,000-foot view of SourceCred, courtesy of Dandelion, and maybe if you could touch on why you think, what role you think a logo might play. Why do we need a logo?
Cool. So SourceCred is 10,000 feet view, and I think you all know, but SourceCred is a tool, a technology for helping communities organize and recognize the people within that community who are contributing. We think this will be really, enable a lot. It'll enable people to feel more invested in the community and feel like they're getting recognized for any work that they're doing. It'll enable the community to kind of like self-direct and self-organize and communicate what are the goals and what are the priorities in a way that people can feel like, they're like winning magic internet points if they do a good job of like supporting those priorities. And I hope that it will create a fair and transparent system where communities that start to earn money and want to be able to give that money to the people who contribute and are not doing it in the context of like a hierarchical corporation where somebody's choosing who gets paid, how much, and has a job. But it's more just like an open source community where people are coming in and out. SourceCred would be useful for kind of dividing those rewards. As for why it needs a logo, well, I think that we're just kind of starting now to really like message SourceCred. We set up the SourceCred Medium account and are starting to talk about it a bit more publicly. We're really trying to build the community around SourceCred itself. And I think that right now we just have this placeholder logo that doesn't really like mean or evoke or communicate very much. So I think on the one hand, it will make SourceCred feel like it's more of like a real project if it has a logo, and it will kind of create more of a spirit of like identity, communal identity around SourceCred, as well as I hope communicate kind of what we're trying to build and like how you should feel about it, or what the intent is in SourceCred.
Remember to unmute. Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that's a great intro. And logos are fascinating. Obviously, we could talk, and people do talk nonstop about logos and debate over them. I mean, and such emotion can be attached to them. When someone redesigns a logo and it doesn't, and it's a big organization does it, like Uber, for example, and it doesn't sit right with a large amount of the population, you would think that this company had just run over their dog or something. I mean, there's just a lot of emotion that can be attached to a logo, and it's like the word branding. It's a shticky word, and it can have attitude attached to it that's smugness and whatnot. But if you just strip away those trappings, those associations, I think just get to the root of it. It's a really cool word because it goes back to like the brand on cattle, for example. It's like branding this. I've got a tattoo and I'm branded with this, with some group I belong to, be it a gang or whatever. It's like I attach my identity. This is a big part of my identity. And anyway, I'm rambling, but I love the power of a brand, and if it can be distilled into something that's visual and not generic, so it's sufficiently unique so that you can see this mark, this little artistic rendering, and without even processing, just go, oh, that's SourceCred. It's just completely on this subconscious, becomes part of the subconscious. Then that's a huge win, and obviously, it's not all that well known of an entity, SourceCred, yet, but hopefully we will, put enough thought and care and artistry into what we're doing now so that it can support that, you know. Once SourceCred gets that, you know, once it gets enough involvement and critical mass of players and is really proving itself useful in the community, you know, the art part will be there, you know, and it'll be just all part of what gives people, you know, lets people, you know, it gives cred to SourceCred anyway, and lets it, you know, hopefully this can last a long time. But a lot of it comes down to words. Anyway, do people have any thoughts, expectations, or anything that you'd like to get out there? Any hopes and dreams about this experience, this workshop?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, SourceCred is really a very niche product. I think that it's going to have to do a lot with people involved in development, also with the open source community on a broader scale. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of symbols that can mean a lot of different things. And one of the ones that I constantly come back to, and I know it's just a stand-in, but the current icon that's being used on the Discord server, for example, it's the green one with the circle and the 4 little lines on it. What I like about that is it really reminds me of Git, of the process of the way you know, people collaborate with code, and just taking a quick fly through of, you know, the Git repository I have running right now on one of my projects, and thinking about how all of these, you know, these merges happen. It really reminds me a lot of like flow diagrams, or even more specifically like switches and like XOR, or, you know, exclusive ORs, or these kind of electronic things, or maybe like rivers. And I guess we're already starting to see a lot of that kind of stuff, you know, with branches of trees and roots, and even these initial D3 diagrams, you know, with the nodes and edges. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, my feeling is, if I was a computer programmer or someone involved in open source and I saw an image kind of like this stuff as an icon, I would immediately have some way to identify what it means. Yeah, that makes sense.
Also, Eric, if you scroll down to the interesting references section, we have now a bunch of stuff in there.
Woo! Awesome. We can resize and we can resize the whole canvas. So, you know, this is.
There we go. I was looking for LV's canvas to put up there when we put it there.
There you go. So.
And I was going to make one point, and I think this is important. You know, we've spoken pretty extensively about the fact that this is bigger than just the technical aspect of open source software creation. And I think, you know, as long as that remains the sort of vision, it's important to not hone in on something that will feel so technical that it doesn't engage with people whose contributions wouldn't be technical.
Hmm.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but I think, you know, I was recently involved in another open source community called Utopian, and they took it to the exact opposite end. And what they ended up doing with their iconography was turning it into toys. And with all of the discussions of the developers who were involved there, it seemed like they couldn't identify with these cartoon characters because it made them feel like children. And I think, you know, I agree with you. I think there has to be some kind of balance in there, though.
I'm just I'm copying some Utopian stuff into the references, so we can all get a kind of sense for that.
Yeah, maybe I can track down one of the Utopian ones that'll show you exactly what I mean.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like the Utopian colors too.
And if you want,
okay, that's it. Exactly. That little character guy, like, turned into the mascot, and then there were dozens of mascots, and depending on what you were doing with open source, you'd have a different kind of mascot. And a lot of people felt totally alienated by it.
Huh.
I just wanted to say, I think that, having some kind of iconography or imagery or structure that speaks to both audiences, the people who are maybe just doing translations and have no idea about code, as well as the guys who are like, building compilers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's totally fair, and I think that's one of the reasons why the discussions to date, at least the ones that I've been involved with, have been really focused on the sort of organic version of a root system, or a variety of like things that have the sort of spreading graphical structure that we associate with code, but also has a sort of organic place where you can sort of engage with it on multiple levels. Not that we have to like totally, zero in on things that we've already talked about, but I would say that at least in amongst those of us who are on this call, we actually spent a pretty large portion of our time at the hackathon hacking on design. So there's a lot of discussion to build on. So I don't know if it makes sense, but I would go and be inclined to throw the floor to LB, Dandelion, potentially Max, and try to like lay a little bit of foundation just based on the discussions to date. Again, not that they're irreplaceable, but just I'm kind of feeling like we should build off of those discussions, because I'm gonna maybe pull a few more diagrams and throw them up on the mural based, if I can find them from past stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it's 100% about the audience, and I think perhaps that other the cartoony one, they just didn't get their audience right, and they not grokking your audience is a huge sin. you got to understand who you're talking to and what you. And not necessarily what you want to say to them, but who you are, know what SourceCred is, and then what you want to communicate comes out of that. But you have to know what they're,
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting to the question of audience, because I think there's sort of like a near-term audience and a longer-term audience, and they're kind of different. The short-term audience for people who I want to start adopting SourceCred are open source project maintainers, and particularly in sort of crypto or crypto adjacent projects, because there's a lot of exciting like near-term stuff to do with like distributing tokens to people involved in crypto projects. And that's sort of like a much more like tech early adopter kind of audience, and like, a lot of the really like techie style logos, like I could throw in a couple examples, would be a good fit there. I also want SourceCred to kind of be able to grow beyond that domain of just like sort of programming projects, because I think that credit attribution is really like broadly useful tool. So I'm kind of thinking a little bit in how like, Amazon started as a bookseller, but they didn't make their website and brand like, everybook.com. They made it Amazon, which kind of gave them enough flexibility to like grow and grow the audience without needing to totally rebrand, which is kind of interesting. And so I think right now, like there's sort of like that intro Medium post that I wrote was kind of aimed at the general audience, but then probably a lot of the other materials we're putting out, like Z's kind of research work, which I think has been getting more traction actually, is kind of more engaging the population of really like techie people who are watching the space closely.
So do you want to take two seconds quickly dump down who you would describe the audience? Grab one of these Post-it notes. You could do Command D to duplicate it. Just everyone take 2 minutes to the extent I don't really know who I would describe the audience as necessarily, but you all have really good ideas. So, and then what you what is our fundamental message to them, or what is our point? What do we want to communicate to them? What do we want to do for them? Some hardcore keyboarding. Awesome.
I get tons of appreciation for how many clacks, the clacks per minute that I can produce on this keyboard is really impressive.
Michelle is
Oh, really? Game on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Do we all get like, we can have different colors for our stickies? Ooh, yeah, I'm going to do this color.
That,
Ellie, do you want to throw some on? I can type them for you and then win some clacking cred. Kind of put this sticky note like, they're kind of combined.
1 minute.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right. Hush. Hush, hush. By the bark
That's
on
the
the wall.
alarm.
Our time is up. But it looks like people still have some thoughts generating, so I can add another minute.
Altruistic to some extent. The moderate altruist.
If there's a monetary
I'm
reward
literally
involved.
referring to Griff because I still can't totally get my head around him. I work with him all the time, and he's a self-proclaimed anarchist, but he's so altruistic, it's confusing.
Yeah, I think one of the people who's been like most engaged with SourceCred is Seth, who's constantly making these discourse posts about like creating crypto economies for like open source projects and rewarding all of the currently oppressed like underclass of open source contributors. And when I put crypto anarchists, I was definitely thinking of him.
So we're on the same page. We're talking about the same.
Anarchy
I
does
have a
not
lot to say about that class of people and like how to enable them, how to connect with them. But I think that's almost its own breakout because of how much actually I think it will end up being the early audience.
Okay, is there anyone who put something which you would like to say something more about, for example, DAO sensory organs? I don't know.
That was me. So and although that's shorthand, it just basically means that there's a lot of discussion actually amongst those same people and others about using DAOs or semi-automated sort of systems to actually do things. And in fact, for the most part, they're undersensed, meaning they can't actually tell what's going on, and people are automating against no information. And so a system like SourceCred is a sensory organ for a system that's automated around the kinds of things that these people are talking about. And again, it's related to the other discussion, and it's a pretty big breakout. So I think most of the people on the call kind of get what I'm saying because we talked about it before. But
Z, if I can I'll just translate this for people who don't know what a DAO is. Basically, people are trying to make a lot of these like crypto organizations or like crypto entities that can use, like cryptocurrencies and smart contracts to actually pay people for doing things in the world. And right now they've got a lot of ability to send payments, but very little ability to figure out what people are actually doing or who should get paid or what's going on in the world. And so SourceCred could be a sensory organ in the sense of actually giving these systems some insight into like who deserves to get paid, who has been contributing labor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. In a nutshell, you're talking about a lot of automation, and automation is only as good as the data that flows into it. And right now the data that flows into it is crap. But it turns out that this is one of potentially many systems that could provide relatively high fidelity data that will facilitate automation. And I put this under audience because it's a little weird, but in some ways I'm saying that the consumer of SourceCred might actually be machines. In that case, it's the developers who would use it, but it's still like actually a utility that could be consumed by something other than a person directly. That's only half true because it couples with the whole maintainers actually maintaining the instance, etc.
I would actually take that point a step further. Is my mic even on?
Yes, it is.
And there's actually been a discussion going on over at the SFOSC. I don't know if I can paste a link here. I'll do that in a second. It's all about the role of artificial intelligence in community contributions, and the discussion kind of got interesting because there was this duality between projects like Greenkeeper that exist to keep your dependencies up to date, but then there are other projects like Deep Code that actually uses neural networks and that type of approach to theoretically improve and thereby change the code. And so I guess, that's why I wrote Humans Not Machines with a question mark, because I was seeing, I didn't even see the DAO sensory organs. I probably would have dragged my point over to that, which I'm doing right now. Because I see a tendency right now in open source where commits and pull requests are being made by machines, where it's not just the sensing and then the smart contract reacting, it's actual like interaction with the code. So that's why I think that it's maybe not for this year, but I'm assuming that this kind of project has a long life ahead of it. And my guess is within 5 to 10 years, we're going to be seeing a lot more of fuzzing going on and diff fixing and stuff like that. So I would not just limit it to the sensory organs.
So I just threw my sort of game theoretic block diagram on there. I know it's a lot to parse, but the reason that I threw it in there was because essentially the moment you introduce machine, like you're describing machine, like editing, like contributing, machine contributing.
Right.
The assumption here is that is going to be relatively close to a strategic rational actor from a cred getting perspective, at least insofar as there's any compensation, possibly even still with just what better measure of what's valuable than what the system is going to tell you gets credit. As a result, though, it's important to think about the interplay between the maintainers and community managers and people who are actually setting the credit allocation policies associated with the instance relative to the participants and their contributions. I'm not going to try to parse that, but I at least as a mental anchor, the moment we start talking about machine contributors, I think that becomes very important to bear in mind.
And filmmakers who put that up, maybe
that was mine, and the reason why is I met a few guys over on the Steam blockchain who were fantasizing about the process of making film and the number of people who are involved. I mean, geez, just look at any film and you see the thousands of people who are involved in the bookkeeping nightmare that is. And I guess, it's a creative act and there are open source films being made. And so, yeah, in a sense, it's also like a citation network, but I bridged off of the idea about archives and Dublin Core because I know for a fact that attribution and provenance are two very important issues with all archives and with things like public domain and what's the other one? Orphan works, you know, like figuring out who did what, when, where is a great way to prove that something is open source, for example. And what that does is it kind of turns the tables on the whole patent system if there's a way to prove that things like prior work were done in this and that way. I'm just kind of brainstorming here. I don't know if there's a direct use for it right now, but I could see this being a way that it could be used in the future.
Right. So
I was going to say that, you know, you're kind of catching on anything that's creative in nature. And I use the term co-creative because it highlights the fact that we create things together. But whenever you create something, you are inevitably sort of, you know, mixing ideas, you're mixing concept, you're having discussions. And I think that inevitably the sort of provenance of creation is amongst the things that are most interesting to us as humans, because, you know, a lot of the value comes from social credit from participating in the creation of a new thing. And this is a very broad class of problem, but it's also like sort of an ontological one. Like, it's old. It's just like people doing stuff together, wanting
it's about to get really huge because of the new copyright laws landing in Europe right now. Like, if you don't have provenance over something, you'll get forced with takedowns. You know, the DMCA is going to be like child's play compared to what the new copyright legislation in Europe will be. You know, so I think that where a political angle to SourceCred could be something that will perhaps interest the anarchists who are interested in justice. You know, I'm not going to say what justice is, but the anarchists, all of the anarchists that I know personally and love, all have a very strong sense of morality and justice. And I think that finding a social hook somewhere, and it's probably like not part of the logo design, but it's something I just wanted to share with the group. I think that, you know, having a political hook to the project is something that will help.
Wow, interesting. So I wonder if we should fast forward to, I'm hearing, you know, a lot of analogs like filmmakers and whatnot. You know, it's a big problem, obviously, too. Especially with, I want to get my plumbing repaired, you know, to figure out, you know, who's good. And I think some of that SourceCred is obviously maybe not in the first couple weeks of SourceCred going to be the single source of truth and the place I go to find, you know, good plumbers and good anythings, you know, in this broad universe of services that exists. But those kinds of things might actually, you know, illuminate what we end up, what a logo ends up looking like, for example. You know, like, is it, you know, in these historical, in these venues that have been around forever, such as plumbers, you know, they have guilds, they have seals, they have, you know, they have check marks, you know, official little graphics that someone can look at and see, you know, and see, wow, they're good, or they were approved by they got an A+ rating by the Plumbing Society of America or whatever, you know. But I think a lot of those, I think there are some analogs out there that might help us move towards, you know, what's appropriate and what's not. And maybe we can, in the interest of time, dive into one of these exercises quickly, and perhaps this real world analogs, where if you want to describe, you know, grab some Post-it notes, describe some real world type situations, services that you think might be, you know, might be a good comparison, might be enlightening for us such as, Amazon collects user reviews and star ratings. I mean, that's an obvious one. Or, or Reddit, people vote up, vote down, vote for Reddit. But does this make sense to everyone? You think it might be useful to do a minute or two on this?
Yes, I wanted to make a comment about the previous things that we did.
Please.
So I just thought when we were trying to create the user flow and stuff like that for the Odyssey hackathon, we were thinking about three basically types of the audience: the maintainers, the users the contributors, and the explorers. So it's like people who will have different user behavior properties. So probably we can divide all those stickers that we just created about the audience to a couple of segments, because I can see right now like open source maintainers and crypto project maintainers, crypto analytics. So a bunch of them are different layer of concepts. So one of those is like precise audience, and another is some sort of adjective to that audience. So I would love to divide this in three segments or three sections, like maintainers, creators, maintainer, or even four: maintainers, explore, and contributors, because it's like different use cases of the stories. So and we can split all of those things that we created in three sections for more easy use.
So why don't we do that while, we'll parallel process. If folks have ideas for real world analogs, go for it up there. And then maybe drag these post-its into these categories. And up there in the real world analogs, if there are, to the extent that there are websites that do that, don't be shy to just drag over from the URL there. It'll give us 4 minutes.
Also, maybe as we get extra time, we can just kind of start throwing stickers on the tone and feel sliders, and then when we get to it, we'll just have some stuff populated there.
Absolutely. I think the moral of the story, especially given the amount of time and given the amazing brains that are in this room, I think if you see something that interests you in one of these categories, just dive in. That in mind, I think maybe forget the timer for now and just
I'd also second Dandelion's suggestion, though. I think of all of the things on this worksheet, that actually was something that we already identified that we want to do with some nuance, because in several cases there's places where we talked already about well, we talked about it a little bit, and actually I would say it's one of the more valuable exercises on the sheet.
It was the most fun to prepare, so that's good to hear.
How did you want this one?
Let's keep on going while we're talking, but I'd love to hear some people's thoughts about these sliders and why you chose the position on a certain continuum.
Well, okay, I actually have to go pretty soon, so I'll just chime in quick. The only thing that ever really strikes me as a masterpiece is something that seems to be above and beyond the cultural mores of the society that created it. And that's why I gave the most important weight to timeless. I know that's a huge challenge, and I know that is just a word in a polar relationship, but I just wanted to say that for me, a good piece of design is something that will always make sense, no matter where you're from, no matter what language you speak. And I've just seen countless times where the cultural identity of a specific country or language or even subculture was presumed to be accessible to everyone around the world, and there's a lot of examples where that's just not the case. And so that's why I wanted to put my weight there. And one other thing, I just want to bring it up because I haven't heard it spoken about yet, is that I made a note of it. I would like to recommend the idea of designing a logo as an animatable design element, something that shows state or personal involvement. And the reason why is that our devices don't live in the 20th century. You know, we have graphics acceleration, we have 3D objects. We can do a lot of, extended design communication with things that are either interactive or programmed iterative. I don't know. I know this is an exploratory meeting. I just wanted to drop that idea here with you guys. And I have like 3 minutes, but I'll stick around.
Cool, thanks.
I think that the interactive idea is pretty cool because I just like the idea of like using new mediums to their limit, and this source code really does live in the digital medium. And I'm also kind of imagining you could show like I have this idea of like showing like a little source cred network evolving in the way that like the cred changes, kind of like those diagrams that you put in the research blog post you made. It's really interesting to see how much like variance there is in the points we chose. Like we almost all want source code to be friendly, except we maybe also want it to be authoritative.
Mm-hmm.
None of us really have an opinion on whether it's conventional or hip. On the organic engineered trade-off, we've got some like range as well. Like I'm kind of surprised I went pro engineer. Maybe I'll just be exactly in the middle.
It's a cop out.
I was surprised that you went engineered when, like, the whole time we've
I've
ever
been pushing
talked
so
about
hard
it,
for the
we've been
organic
talking
thing.
about plants and
This is-
like root networks
Yeah.
and
This is the place where I literally had to make notes because I think that those two, algorithmic human and organic engineered, I personally think that where SourceCred stands out is orthogonal to that plane, where you can accept the fact that you don't have to make these dichotomies, and then SourceCred lives in the space where you get both. It's hard to get both, and you might have to sacrifice other things, but if you want to really like nail SourceCred on this, what I see is meh on most things and focusing on how to basically break the dichotomy in human and algorithmic and break the dichotomy in engineered organic, like that, stepping off that plane and trying to find something that like manages to evoke both of like both sides of those would to me be inherently source credit.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I like the idea of using that as like an anchor, like the challenge of like making the algorithmic and the human become like unified. I feel like anything we got from like exploring that would be really rich for us.
So that's my notes with the brains on the outsides and the
Yeah, I like how you communicated that with the dual brains.
yeah.
Bioengineered.
And I wanted to say that I usually, basically right now, I don't know how to move those things because I'm used to first I'm setting a goal, what I want to achieve with a certain piece of design, and then I'm moving towards how to achieve that with which feelings that I want to evoke in the viewer and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have, or if you have something to say, what can be achieved using the logo and what we want to achieve using the logo design, that probably would help me to move those levers.
Yeah, the graphics side is definitely much more just about what are people's, you know, just like off the cuff thoughts about what it might be, as opposed to prescriptive, like everyone thinks it should be chunky, so let's make it chunky. The tone is going to very much drive, you know, where we land on the tone, on the mood, on the feel. That's going to drive what we end up doing graphically, and you know, really, it's more of an indulgence for me, kind of, to see what y'all think about graphics, because you know, I think you live in this space and you've seen a lot of. I think perhaps you've seen a lot of you know, a smattering of organizations that you respect, and they have certain kinds of identities and things that just like, oh, they you know, I really dig super intricate 3D, you know, immersive stuff that gets to the soul of you know, this crazy engineering brain, you know, or and you know, at the end of the day, we might just eschew all this stuff and say we actually have something completely out of left field, and hopefully, maybe that makes it very different from everything out there that's already in this field, and that might be something that we want. That might be a desirable trait. But there is, there's.
You guys, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, Eric, but I have to go. And I just wanted to say thank you, and it was really nice to meet everybody, and look forward to seeing you next time. Okay?
Yeah, thanks so much. Please do join us. Great input.
Okay. My pleasure. Ciao.
I try and get at least one false dichotomy into every workshop I do, so big win. I see a lot of variety in here. Does anyone want to talk more about something they put in here? Minority report, heads up display, for example. I don't know who put that.
Should I put a beware of SourceCred in there? SourceCred was the joke, the evil version of SourceCred.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, yeah.
Elvie, do you want to talk about do thing?
Is that what we're on?
I think minority report probably, I think orange is the color that Daniel is using, and he's not here, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, did a thing is something that Dandelion actually came up with when we were living in a house of 6 people. And, everybody does some work to keep the house clean, but everybody feels like they're the only one who does anything because it's a huge house. It always needs to be cleaned, and you never see anybody else doing it. You just walk home and you notice whether or not it's dirty, not whether or not it's clean. So in our Slack channel for our community, we just started putting hashtag did a thing. I washed all the dishes. Hashtag did a thing. I swept the kitchen floors. Hashtag did a thing. I put all of the kitchen towels into the laundry. Hashtag did a thing. I made sure our check got to our landlord. And then we would just flood each other with positive emojis as awesome, you did the thing. And it made it really easy to positively reinforce what was going on in the house, and you knew whether or not you were really contributing, but nobody was on your ass being like, why don't you ever clean?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think it was a good example of the power of recognition to people just being rewarded by recognition, and that helping create more of the behavior that was getting recognized, and also kind of creating
sense of
more
ownership.
of a sense of ownership and community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was very powerful. It helped a lot with our house.
Well, and I think it's actually really important. I know, again, we talked about this a lot, but there's a cognitive availability bias that's very clearly comes into play with any sort of coordinated behavior, because you can observe all of what you do and only a small subset of what others do. And so inevitably you get a scenario where people overweight their contributions, not in any sense of they're not trying to negate other people's efforts, but you can literally observe 100% of what you do and only a small percentage of what others do.
Yep.
So we can fix that by making everything much more visible and interconnected, so you can see the way what you've done and others do interconnect. I also would say that that's, an aspect of this that should be highlighted, that the interconnections is part of the solution. It's not just the list of things people did, but the interconnectedness of those things actually helps it be more even. And I think in your house, in your community, that was sort of implicit, the interconnectedness. In something like this, the interconnectedness might, it becomes explicit through SourceCred, whereas it doesn't, that interconnectedness doesn't scale for free. You get to a big community, it's not immediately clear that what someone else did is relevant to you. And in a sense, this tells you that it is.
Yeah. When I was drawing the canvas for SourceCred at the hackathon, I had a guy come up and he was like, is this a rhizome? And I thought that was a really good description of a non-hierarchical interconnected network.
So I have an example as well. I just remembered just yet, I believe on Friday, one of my teams, technical teams, was having a retrospective meeting, and then they moved to a grooming session when they discuss and do this planning poker and stuff like that. So if you will supervise the group of people doing that sort of activities, you can see how they resembling me, the person who is exploring the graph. So we having this graph in SourceCred where there is a contributions and priorities and stuff like that. Basically, the group of people who's doing retrospective doing the same thing, but only verbally. Yeah, that's it.
Is there any grouping that could be done here? I see, I put these two together, research citations, and read how many times something is referenced in a history book. That I hear in SourceCred descriptions, this idea of I made a contribution and it was referenced. My code was used in several other places. So that's definitely a theme there. And then there's the word of mouth.
I added another screenshot that sort of relates to what Max just said. So in the research version of the My Research Medium article, one of the things I called out was the history of the academic citations research. But there's a screenshot of a bibliography from as far back as the 70s that references the relationship between the firm internal network and the citation network. And so kind of going to what Max was saying, the structural sort of social scientific observation about the similarity in these networks is something longstanding that actually we already kind of at least know that these things have a similar structural character. And at least, I think it's actually very interesting that this problem is still so poorly addressed given how long it's been known about and understood.
So do we envision, what are the different ways that I can get rewarded? You've got the financial, obviously, as you're talking about. What's that allied product that you're talking about that you're developing, Dandelion? Not
SourceCred.
SourceCred.
Yeah.
Sort of.
With the ability to kind of create tokens based on cred, and then open source projects that issue these tokens, use them for governance and so forth.
Yeah, and there's points. I've earned X number of points.
Yeah.
Or and badges, levels.
Yeah, giving out badges on the basis of cred would be interesting. If you earn at least 400 cred in implementation, you get the implementation badge. That seems to work for other people designing these sort of quantified reward system things.
So I'm unfamiliar with SourceCred. That came up previously in this session.
Sorry, it's a sort of it's a shorthand for the version of the world where SourceCred would be used in an authoritarian or a sort of because it is essentially a
dystopian SourceCred.
Yeah, it's dystopian SourceCred. So there's a reason why it's important to pay attention to the way, just the ways in which the technology can be used that are, if you make it a God's eye as opposed to a sort of thing that you instance and use for your maintenance of your own project, or even in the context of a project, if the maintainer uses it to, depending on how they use it, there's just some very different feel for the participants. One of the ways to think about it has to do with if you don't have a way out, if you're not opting in, I think of SourceCred as being, if I'm measured by SourceCred and I don't have a choice, then I have a problem. Because in a sense, the way this should or could work is that I'm opting into a community that is expressing its values and measuring itself this way it's just very different. And I put it with the China social credit system because I think that agency is really important for a system like this, because if you guys are sort of understand.
Yeah, I think that's another aspect where making it possible for people in the community to suggest different weightings on SourceCred makes it less forced credit. It's not like, you know, the single like maintainer controls everyone's reward, but like maybe people in the community can just like propose and like change the weights. Yeah.
But there's also a level at which it's difficult to understand. So one of the things that I've been trying to point out is that the feels right in the short term and the feels right in the long term are not guaranteed to be aligned. So you have actual responsibility as the person who's managing an instance or managing a project to sort of understand their inherent trade-off of, you know, everyone's going to feel like in the dishes situation, like they're doing a lot and they should get a lot of credit. And you're going to have there's a fundamental embedded perspective in a community where everyone's perspective is going to be a little bit unique, and what feels right in the short term can be out of alignment with what drives the coordinated behavior in the long term. And so sort of understanding the nuance needs to happen at one level, but then the ability to engage without having to understand it deeply happens at another level. And so, I mean, now we're just sort of getting into the nuances of what SourceCred is, but I think this relates to the different audiences and the levels of engagement, like, you know, cognitive engagement they actually have to have. An explorer needs to have probably the least level of engagement. A contributor needs to have enough to feel good and feel like they can give feedback, you know, and not have a force cred scenario. And a maintainer needs to have a level of understanding that actually allows them to essentially do real-time game design, because they're creating the rules of a game that these people are playing in a sense. And those people playing it needs to result in the overall sort of productivity of the project. And so there's like multiple levels of depth and multiple levels of feedback embedded in like this sort of community management problem. And I'm not saying all that has to somehow fit in a logo, but we are talking about audiences down here. And I'm kind of imagining that the depth to which we need these roles to connect is not actually uniform.
Cool. Yeah, that's super helpful. I wonder if we want to, if it's worth dot voting on to determine who our core audience is for among these four, or to rank them, or if it's obvious. Sometimes what we think is obvious, you know, comes out differently in dot voting.
How do we dot vote? Will we just go and like put a pin next to each one that we're voting for?
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, no, there's fancy. Wait for it.
Yeah, so you do a dot voting session. I can start a dot voting session, and then I believe that I would just put a dot by whom you think should be our core audience, and then maybe whom you think should be, or the top three.
Can you please explain what do you mean by four?
Michelle, you're more schooled in dot voting.
Well, do you want people to dot vote just the category or the actual card?
I would vote I would vote on creators, maintainers, explorers, and or contributors. And if you think someone should be this is our primary audience, then do not be shy about putting more than one dot.
In that case, people only get 1 or 2 dots. We can't have 4. There's 4 categories.
And what's the paradigm that you were also considering?
No, when you put 4, I just assumed maybe you were talking about putting them on the cards.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, give people 1 or 2 if you're nice. I'm mean. I would do 1. Make people choose. But you might be nicer than me.
Let's just do 1. Keep it simple.
Ha!
Who do you think
choose
our
your top
audience
1.
should be? and and it'll be blind, so you won't be influenced by by Dandelion. So boom, go for it.
Don't look at Eric's screen, I suppose.
Okay, so
I won't vote. I'll abstain. Everyone voted?
I'm going to see if I can give you a vote too.
5 people voting.
Are we?
Has everyone voted?
Vote now by clicking on one.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, Dandelion, I don't know if y'all had the same screen open, you're gonna have to agree.
I made another screen. Okay. Cool.
3, 2, 1. Yeah. Ending session for everyone. Okay, interesting. So we had 2 voters on 2 votes for maintainers.
I think maintainers actually got 3 because there's one sticky note that's.
Oh, this is, yeah. I probably failed to explain it clearly enough. So we do have 3 maintainer votes, and then 1 each for creators and contributor.
I'm not sure I totally understood what all these categories are. So.
I wanted to make a comment about the audience. So I see those, roles as creator, maintainer, explorer, and contributor, not as like strictly and solidly divided types of audience. It's more like, your mask that you're wearing when you're doing something. For example, you can take Dandelion, who is a creator, a maintainer, and contributor, and explorer sometimes. So basically we're talking about amount of time, which are basically percentage of time for a user being someone, fulfilling some role. And those can be changed during the lifetime of the project. As for me, for now, the most important audience for us is maintainers, because we want to evoke curiosity and to attract them so they can download their own instance of SourceCred and play with it. The second part for me, most important for me, would be contributors, because this is like a fuel why maintainers would be wanting to use it. And yeah, basically what I wanted to say is that more like roles than like different types of people.
Yep, that makes sense, certainly.
Yeah, I think kind of riffing off of that, the reason I voted for maintainers is similarly that right now it's the maintainers who kind of have the decision of whether or not to use SourceCred for their project. And then a lot of the UI right now that I'm building is kind of ways for maintainers to set up the system to make it work better for their community. But I think in the medium term, if I'm kind of imagining a SourceCred website in my head, it's got one section like SourceCred for maintainers. Like, why should you want to turn this on for your project? Oh, by recognizing people, they'll help the project more, and you'll be able to kind of guide or influence people to make the changes that matter most. And there'll be SourceCred for contributors. Like, why should you be excited to contribute to a project with SourceCred? Oh, well, you'll get recognition for your work. Maybe you'll get paid if the project has money. Maybe that recognition will help you get a job. It's making public contributions in open source, so it helps a lot for getting employment nowadays. So I see maintainers and contributors as the 2 core audience. But for the SourceCred chicken and egg right now, maintainers are the ones who have leverage to actually turn it on.
I also voted for maintainers, and my logic was pretty similar to Dandelion's. I would say I view SourceCred first off as sort of enabling maintainers to enable contributors. And if you reason about it that way, it makes sense to start by enabling the maintainers, and then combined with our already experience from dogfooding it, I think there's a real need for us to focus on both our own use and sort of collectively. I think we're still very much at a stage where we have to think from the perspective of a maintainer, and also get feedback from others. And I think just that same chicken and egg problem, the best information in the medium term even is going to come from maintainer feedback about their ability to facilitate their contributors. It won't be until sort of we get to that stage that the contributors' feedback is quite as useful.
And is it fair to say that although these are different roles and different masks that one person may play at different times, that generally the maintainers and the contributors are often different people?
I would say maintainers are definitely a distinct population, and
Yeah.
that only a very small portion of people who are engaged in the open source ecosystem are project maintainers.
Right on.
But I think it's interesting to note that a lot of people will probably put themselves in the shoes of their maintainer in order to reason about it, especially during early adoption. So a contributor who is participating in a project that is got source cred is often going to think about what they would do if they were the maintainer.
Yes, and I wanted to say, just lost it. So what I was wanting to say is, let's take the SourceCred software. Basically, this is a software, and I just on Friday had a class with my students where we were discussing the types of the software, and if we will take it from one of use cases as a maintainer, explorer, or a contributor, it will be one type of the software, and we should align our branding with this type. And if you will be talking about landing page, like the gates to the project, because this is an open source, and the landing page as a mean to use participant acquisition is really important, and the requirements and criteria properties of the branding for the landing page can be really different. So I want to structure it and divide it in kind of what types of the websites and what types of software are we creating branding for. To make an example, I recently was working with guys from give me a second, how Gitcoin. So, and they have several sections on their websites, basically different types of services they provide to their audience, and they have different logos for every single section. So there is like some icons for the kudos, there is some icons for the other parts of, well, basically you got what I'm saying.
Right, that's very interesting. Definitely all within a family, but a different, sort of a different angle depending on your role.
Yeah, basically what I was trying to say, it would be more smart, and if I would be doing that as usually as I do, I would probably think first what kind of the software, where the use case for the logo would be, where it would be engaged firstly, and then I will, from that point, I will be doing some restrictions and desires towards my branding. So
And that gets into the, after you've developed what is the core imagery, what is the core identity, then how can that expand and be, like if it's something organic like a plant, then what are the, is there some kind of a bud logo, are there little related logo, related artistic avenues that you can that can give unique personality to different parts of the product website. We're way over time, which is on me, my fault. But does someone have a thought they've been wanting to make sure they communicate before we wrap?
Well, I wanted to ask what the sort of actual action items are. I think this was productive in the sense that it created a lot of artifact of what I think was largely ongoing discussions without a lot of artifact, especially all in one place. But I still don't know or totally understand what the what the action items are associated with making progress around like logos and branding.
Yeah, the actions are going to be on the designer side mostly. Well, next step would be probably regroup with Dandelion, for example, and to just make sure that I'm understanding things the way that in an accurate fashion, and then I would probably develop some mood boards that just kind of this sort of visually. Here's a visual family that's kind of, and here's another visual family that I interpret from what I've gleaned here, because this could go different visual directions. So the general notion is for me to to get something back in front of the group as soon as possible, and in maybe two or three ranges that doesn't involve like necessarily original drafting of logos, and then for us to discuss those directions and which sort of family we think might be promising. So we would have another session probably to go over some mood boards, and then getting more and more focused after that, like what are some specific logo concepts. So it's on the designers primarily, but additionally I would, if people have thoughts about, what are some key descriptors of SourceCred, I think that first jot and sort exercise, which you didn't get to, could really be useful. And if people are able to asynchronously drop some words in there, fundamentally it's about openness, it's about credibility, it's about reputation, just these kinds of words can help us.
LB, do you still have that notebook? Do you want to take screenshots of the
and
photos?
that's another thing.
I feel like there
go
was
back and
days of notes about words.
Those are the ones that I wrote. Yes.
Yeah, they're days of word brainstorming, and actually, if you just take photos of them and drop them in there, and then
I basically just wrote what is SourceCred about and how do you communicate it.
Yes. No reinventing the wheel, please. To the extent that stuff exists, drop it in there and don't worry about the format.
Cool. I would also recommend reading, even if it's browsing, and maybe we can do some tagging, but there's a lot of discussion in discourse, like a pretty extensive self-discovery has been going on for the last 2 months, and I think it would behoove anyone who's working on design to at least sort of browse and key in on places where that discussion sort of heats up, because I don't know, it's sort of been a journey of self-discovery, and I feel it would be hard to do the branding without browsing at least.
Yeah, so I'm thinking at least the SourceCred Treasury post, the SourceCred and Outcompeting Capitalism post are both ones that come to my mind.
Yes, please drop anything down here, and I just don't join discourse, so I'll poke around in there. But I know this is not a new discussion for y'all. With that, I will let y'all go. It's been really enlightening.
Cool. Thank you for hosting, Eric.
Yeah. And I'll let y'all know when this is posted. I'll put it on Discourse.
Cool. And we also have a SourceCred YouTube channel. So maybe if you can just
excellent.
Send me a link to the recording. Somehow we'll get it uploaded. Or maybe I'll just give you rights to upload to that channel so you can do it directly.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Do you want me to tweet the video from the SourceCred Twitter after the
yeah, we could tweet a link to the mural too. That would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, once the materials are available, I'll do that.
Cool.
Okay.
We can make sure, Eric, I'll make sure we've got the right link. I think there's one that's a view only, anyone can look at it without signing in link. We'll make sure we grab that one.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you. Good to meet you all.